Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classics and Classics. This is episode number 1675 and Doubleshot number 1569. Now, I have one Marvel trade, one DC trade. The first one is a combination, it's not one of those things from Civil War 1, obviously, where it's basically originally was two separate trades that Marvel decided to combine into one for some reason. I'm not really sure why I did this for. Yes, there's actually a couple more of these like this, where they basically took issues from two separate series that completely unrelated to each other and put them in one trade. The only times I've seen this happen was with Captain America and Iron Man, where they basically put the Captain America tie-in issues, which was issues 22 to 24 of Captain America Volume 5, the Winter Kills one-shot, which originally was in the Captain America Civil War trade, and then of course they took that and plus the two Iron Man issues and combined them into one book. And they did the same thing for X-Men Universe. You don't know what that trade is. I haven't viewed it yet, but mostly put that one is simply put two issues of X Factor, and I think it's like 3 issues of Cable and Deadpool. And they simply put just combine. There's no individual trade for those two. For those issues, Marvel simply combined into one, and that was the way it was originally published. These other ones were just published as separate trades, and then Marvel decided to combine into one. This is not one of those. This is simply put, I didn't know that they did for these two series. Harris for Hire and Thunderbolts. Yep. Excuse me. Now, interesting enough, they actually start with the Thunderbolt stuff in here. Yep. Now, for Thunderbolts, we got issues 101 to 105. Now, these are the last. This is basically the end, toward the end of an era for Thunderbolts. It's the end of the long era that Fabian DeCisa, and I believe he was one of the co-creators of Thunderbolts, if I'm not mistaken. And he'd been on the book for quite a while. I think he was also the second actual writer of the book, if I'm not mistaken. Because now, oddly enough, Mark Bagley would not work on these issues. No, he won't. And you're thinking, really? Yes, really. Now, for these issues, mostly put, Fabian DeCisa, mostly put, is the main writer of this book. And he simply took over from, of course, from Kurt Busiek, who was the original writer of the book. And Fabian DeCisa was a long-running writer for Thunderbolts. Yes, Fabian DeCisa basically is also known for co-creating the New Warriors. Now, as for his era for Thunderbolts, he worked this book from issue 24. Then he left with basically the story that came after this one. Yeah, he was on this particular book for quite a while, actually. Yes, he was also by far one of the longest running writers for Thunderbolts. Yes, he seriously was. Yeah. Fabian DeCisa is nowhere to be one of Marvel's more prolific writers. You probably think is doing anything today for Marvel? Not currently, no. But he wrote a lot of comic books for Marvel. Current count, 616 comics here for Marvel. I think the current book he's working on right now is X-Men Legends, which basically is from the 1990s. Yes. Yes. I think came onto this book like just after he wrapped up his run for New Warriors. Yes. Because 24 was in fact the very first issue he wrote for the series. And he was here for a long time. Actually, I think it may have been 34 was his first issue he wrote. Yeah, 34 was the first issue he ever wrote for the series. And it just seems as though he was a very prolific writer in the book. And I don't think he skipped an issue. No, not really. I'm looking at it right now. He was on this book for quite a while. Yep. Once he came on 34, he never left. He even worked on New Thunderbolts, and he even basically was still on the book even after the renumbering. He left with issue 109. So yes, the guy had been writing the book since 1990. Let's see, how long was it? Since like 34 was in fact the very first issue he wrote. He came with a book in, well, cover date was January 2000, so it's probably November 1998. And it didn't leave until, well, because the series did take a hiatus for a few years due to the fact the book basically was canceled. But mostly put, he was the regular writer of the book for a long time. Yes, 109 was in fact his last issue he ever wrote for the series. Yep. And that came out in 2000, cover date was February 2007. My guess was probably in December of 2006. So mostly put, he wrote this book for 6 years straight and wrote a ton of issues for the book. Now, this is only the second trade I review that actually scratched. This is actually I believe it is the fourth trade I reviewed that collect issues from his run of the book, because I have reviewed the 2 trades of Hawkeye and Thunderbolts, those were really good, by the way. And also, of course, there is the Guardian Protocol trade would come right after this one. Mostly put in the case of Civil War 1 for the tie-in, it doesn't start to issue 103, because most of what Thunderbolts do in their own thing. And in the case of the Civil War 1 tie-in, it's mostly put there to set up Fabian DeCisa's last official story arc for the run, Guardian Protocols, which is a quick 4-parter. No, seriously, it's a 4-part storyline that ends his long 6-year epic run on the book. Yep. He's also by far the longest writer who actually wrote Thunderbolts. Yes. And mostly put in the case of, well, the stuff with a relationship going on between Songbird and Baron Zemo. That's basically a thing in this book. Joystick is here, but she leads to the very next story arc, because even though Fabian DeCisa didn't create this character, that's a Kurt Busiek character, he had her outed as basically a spy for the Grand Master for some reason. I don't know why. Yep. Thunderbolts tie is actually pretty good. Even though it doesn't do much with Civil War 1, it's mostly put just Thunderbolts to get their hands on a boatload of super villains. Mostly a lot of C-listers. Though the only really big name villain they get is Dr. Octopus. No, seriously. They had this thing called the Thunderbolts Army, which was first assembled in issue 103. And they have a lot of, they have a big, humongous army of villains. I mean, aside from the regular cast, per se, these are your members of the Thunderbolts Army. Yes, Thunderbolts had an army in this period of time. It was very brief, only lasted for a few issues, and these are your members. Ajax, Batroc Lieber, Aqueduct, Backlash, Bloodstrike, the Beatles. No, not the Rockman, no, not the current Beetle. Boomerang, Bullseye, Bushmaster, Death Adler, Dr. Octopus, EO, Green Goblin, Iron Maiden, Jack-O-Lantern. Not sure which one. Jester, not sure which one. Killer Strike, King Cobra, Lady Deathstrike, Machete, Mongoose, Overmind, Ox II, Porcupine, Primus, Phoenix, Quicksand, Rotter, Red Ronin, who was actually a character from Godzilla comics. Yeah, Marvel had Godzilla briefly. Scarecrow, Silk Fever, Slide, who is actually original. This one's actually dead. Smiley Tiger, Snake Mustin, Taskmaster, Texas Twister. Yeah, seriously. The Bat Gorgon Venom, Pterodillion, Furman, Whiplash, Whirlwind, the UFOs, the Wrecking Crew, and Zoran. And this was the lineup they had. And after a few issues, they just end. Yeah, it's kind of weird of how the heck that is. Red Ronin, if you're curious who created this character, he actually first showed up, the original version of the character first showed up in Godzilla King of the Monsters in 1978. Yeah, Marvel briefly had a comic book. And it was created by Doug Moak and Herb Temple. Herb Trampe. Herb Trampe is no longer alive. He passed away about 7 years ago. While Doug Moak is still very much alive, though hasn't written a comic book in 20 years. Yeah, that's the weird thing about him. It's like he is I think he's like retired mostly. I'm not sure what the heck he's up to nowadays. Yeah, and the last special comic he wrote was the JLA Act of God miniseries, and that was 22 years ago. That was the last comic he worked on. Yep. Thunderbolts time I thought was real. I thought Thunderbolts issue was really good. Heroes for Hire, which this collects the first 5 issues of the second volume of Thunderbolts. And you're thinking, not Thunderbolts, Heroes for Hire. You're thinking second volume. Was there a first one? Yes, there was. Published back in the late 1990s, written by John Ostrander. And mostly put, if you read the book, it came out just after Events of Onslaught. Only last 19 issues. When I read, the reason why the series ended was due to low sales. That was the reason. And it managed to publish 19 issues and have an annual. And it managed to get canceled at the same time as the short-lived Quicksilver ongoing series. Yes, now, these are your lineup on the back of the book. Now, some of you may recognize a few of these people. Like, look, there's Black Cat. Yeah, fun fact, very first group she ever joined. Yes, she later joined the Defenders of their Mad Factions run. Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. Colleen Wing from the Iron Fist comics. Misty Knight, also from Iron Fist, though technically her first appearance was back in Marvel Team number 1. And you're thinking, who's that sexy Latina lady standing next to Black Cat? That is Tarantula. That is seriously her name. This comic was her debut. And she had a brief thing with Shang-Chi that went absolutely nowhere. And you're thinking, who the heck is that strange looking guy standing next to Misty Knight? That is a character named Humbug. No, seriously, that is his name. He is a C-list Spider-Man villain who made his first appearance back in Web of Spider-Man number 15. Mostly put for this version of the Heroes for Hire, they're a sanctioned, mercenary organization that work for Initiative. And Black Cat, this is basically her way of going legit. The book started publishing back in 2007, was discontinued the following year. This book was infamous for a tie-in for World War Hulk. I believe it was issue number 11, I believe it was. I think it was 13. It was 13. It was a controversial cover due to the fact it depicted Misty Knight, Colleen Wing, and Tarantula implied they were raped by aliens. Yes. When I heard this cover received a humongous amount of controversy online. I didn't know about this until several years later. I remember the cover. It's a really good cover. Then everybody thinking, who does this cover right here? Because this comes from Heroes for Hire. Heroes for Hire is actually done by Justin Cray and Jimmy Palmiotti. Yep, they're the ones who do this one. The back cover is done by Billy Tashi, who was also the interior artist of Heroes for Hire for the first 4 issues. Though, took over, they basically have Francis Porte code the issue 2, though Francis Porte does issue 5 by himself. And the other artist is Mark Sparico, who just does the cover. The artwork for Thunderbolts is mostly done by Tom Grimmett. That's who does it. Yep. And this is a typo here on this page here. It says Thunderbolts 101 to 103 when it actually collects from 101 to 105. I'm not really sure why that is. Aside from the fact this is a Civil War, it has very little to do with Civil War 1 and 2. Heroes for Hire has a little bit more to do with Civil War 1 due to the fact they actually interact with the Resistance, where they run into Luke Cage in his only appearance in the entire volume. Yes. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna give this book a 9 out of 10. Now, Luke Cage, people know him as, comic fans know him as the original Hero for Hire. Because that was his thing. He basically has to be paid to be hero. That was his thing back in the 70s. And basically, he was part of the John Ostrander run, because basically the Hero for Hire firm was originally where it was Heroes for Hire. That was when Iron Fist joined the company back in issue, I think it was 50, when a book was called Luke Cage Power Man. It was renamed to Power Man Iron Fist for issue 50. and it made that title into issue 125, where it was discontinued, but brought back briefly at the events of Shadowland for about 5 issues, and it brought back again, this time by David Walker, I think it was like in 2016, I think it was. It came 2016, I think it was. It came out right after Secret Wars. Great series, should not have been canceled. But in the case, those were the original Heroes for Hire. The one from the 90s, that was a group that was sponsored by a company that was owned by Name with a Submariner, known as Oracle. They're the one who financed it. Heroes for Hire, this version is sponsored by the U.S. government. That's what's implied here. Or at least sponsored by S.H.I.E.L.D., because Tony Stark is there just to help set up the group. And then, of course, issue 5 ends with a kid just hiring them with a jar full of money hiring for a case. That kind of leads to the second story for the series. That's kind of weird, though. In the case of these two series, where in the case of Thunderbolts, that leads into the last story from the season would do for the book before. Book was taken over by Andy Diggle briefly and Crystal Gage before, I think it was Jeff Parker took over for a long period of time for Thunderbolts. Up until the book's cancellation. Yes. In the case of Heroes for Hire, while in the case of Thunderbolts, that managed to last for, numbering-wise, for another 69 issues before it got renamed to Dark Avengers. In the case of Heroes for Hire, this book managed to last for another 10 issues before being canceled. It was briefly brought back in 2011 by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, which I think that was one of the last comics they worked on together because, well, the last official comic they worked on was the Guardians of the Galaxy Prelude, released in 2013, I think it was 2014, I think it was. Alright, moving on to a different book, we have another really good book. We have Catwoman, Volume 2, called No Way Down. This collects issues from Catwoman, Volume 3, issues 10 to 24, and the Secret Files and Origins one-shot. Written by Ed Brubaker and Cameron Stewart. Now you're probably thinking, Cameron Stewart, that name sounds very familiar. Wasn't that also one of the writers' books like Gotham Academy, Batgirl, Black Canary? Yep, same person. And Brubaker, this book is definitely one of his best-known books he worked on. But it's one of like 3 major books he worked on at DC. He also worked on Detective Comics. He also worked on Gotham Central. And he did have some work on Batman. Yeah, he had a brief run. He had basically it was Batman, Detective Comics, this book, and Gotham Central. And that was it for DC for him. That's all the major books he worked on for DC. Marvel, he's more known for his Marvel work than he does for his DC work, per se. Yes, also the thing with this book is you have this thing in here, we have Catwoman sleeping with Slim Brady Sr. Because Jr. shows up later. And, well, get more on that later. Mostly put the way Ed Brubaker treats the Catwoman series, it's basically like a crime noir thing. Which, I don't mind that at all. Ed Brubaker basically is known for doing stuff like this, and also known for doing spy stuff. Now, the crime noir stuff fits very well with Catwoman. And plus, by the way, this is kind of the art style, basically, we have used throughout this whole run. Now, basically, Cameron Stewart was the artist of these issues. Stephen Grant, who was underrated writer, in my opinion, heck, even Mike Zeck agrees with me on that. He's a very underrated writer. These are your artists for this book. Cameron Stewart, Javier Pudo, Brad Ritter, Rich Burnett, Dan Davis, Guy Davis, Nick Dugan, Mike LaPerca, Mike Manley, Michael Avon Evering, and Eric Schoner. Mostly put it's like a series of adventures for Catwoman. I wasn't saying Black Cat. Now, of course, this is basically continuing the very long Catwoman Volume 3, which was 82 issues originally published, though it did have a bonus issue released in 2009 as part of the Blackest Night tie-in. Yep. Most of the it's like a series of adventures for Catwoman East End, not Alleyway like it is in the current Catwoman book, which was originally done by Julie Jones and Ram V. Now, Ram V is actually leaving the book soon. By the way, there's actually one more book that actually collects Brubaker's run for the book. Yes, and for some reason, I can't get my hands on it via Flint. I probably look for it someplace else. Of course, that book collected the last 13 issues of the book. Yep, 13 issues. This book collects 15 issues of the book plus a one-shot. The Secret Origin Files Origins was when now. This book is a combination of, I think, about 3 trades, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see here about that. If I remember correctly, I think it's about 3 trades. Let's see. Yeah, 3 trades. It basically, mostly 2, but does finish up collecting. Was originally published in Crooked Little Town, which collected issues 5 through 10, and one of the stories. Basically, in a way, it's a combination of 2 trades, but partially another one. And then the very next volume for the trade series, it was started collecting issues that had never been collected until before. Because the original trade series, for some strange reason, skipped over, though the War Games issues were collected, but a lot of the remaining issues between 24 and 52 were not in trade. I have, of course, discussed some of these issues in Backwards Masking, which collects some issues of the six volume of the trade series. But basically, it's actually 5 and 6. Yep. And now you might be asking, Nick, is there any encounters with Batman in these issues? Not really, per se. Batman doesn't really play a role in these issues because it's Catwoman's book. Batman does show up like once in a while. Oh, by the way, great cover artwork by, I think this was Amanda Connor did this cover artwork. Let's see if I missed it here. This cover artwork was done by J.G. Jones and Paul Maltus. Great cover art here. Yep. And mostly put, this just deals with Catwoman's sister. And Cameron Stewart has this thing where, yeah, we have to keep showing Catwoman butt naked. Yeah, like here. You can see her clearly naked. And of course she, well, not exactly fully naked person because she's wearing a pair of panties. And one thing I thought was kind of weird for this book was Catwoman having a just sleeping with Slim Brady, a guy who's owned to be her grandfather. Makes no freaking sense. He's like way too old for him. And at one point, she teams up with the JSA. Well, later on, some issues she meets up with Hawkman, which I thought was really good. Which I think this may have been the only time ever wrote anything for Hawkman. And that's of course toward the end of the book. And there's also one issue where she goes to Opal City. She briefly leaves Gotham City for a few issues. And she goes to a few different places. The first place she goes is Opal City, which, as you can see in this awesome cover here, which, by the way, if you look up on the DC Wiki page, they use this very image where she goes to Opal City, which is the home to the Jack Knight Starman. And we have a museum here for the Ted Knight Starman, who actually died in the Starman ongoing series by James Robertson, which is a really good series. I do recommend checking it out. Like, aside from the fact that they're in Opal City, you're probably thinking, okay, where's the Shade? Does he appear in this issue because they're in Opal City? He was operating Opal City at this point. No, not really. I thought it was kind of weird, the fact that you're in Opal City, you don't have any of the characters from the Starman book make guest star appearance. That may be due to, and this is my theory, maybe it was probably James Robertson. I get maybe not using Jack Knight, but you could use the Shade. Nope. And then go to St. Rock, which, yeah, this is their period of time. I think at this time when this issues came out, I believe this period of time, this is when Jeff Johns was still writing the book. Let's see. I think this was the issue where she runs the... Let's see. Oh, it's actually 24. Yeah, it's part of the Wild Ride stuff where they go to, well, where the Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Ted Grant, aka Wildcat. Yes. Okay, Mason O'Dare is in this book for a guest star appearance. but he's like pretty much like the only person. Which I thought was kind of weird. That of all the people you bring from Starman, you bring one character who, yeah, and this was like the only appearance this guy made outside the comic book. Yes. In one issue. And I think this was kind of dumb on the part of Edward Bigger for doing this. Where you bring in two characters from the Starman comic book. And I get maybe not using Jack Knight at this period of time. This came out in 2003. So yes, I think Ed Brubaker was having guest appearance with Hawkman in the next issue. I think the Hawkman issue was really good, especially since that he basically, you can kind of say that the issue 24 is just an advertisement for the Hawkman series, which is really good, by the way. And that's simply what 24 is, basically just an advertisement for the Hawkman series. Yeah. It basically is mostly stuff in book, basically the reason why that where Catwoman goes to various places. Like, the first place it goes to is Keystone City, where she runs to Captain Cold and the Weather Wizard. And you're thinking, really? Yep. Really? Yep. So, advertising for Jeff Johnson's Flash. And then, of course, you have advertising for the James Harper Summer, which I think had just ended this point. Yep. But this book is really good. I give this book a 9.5 out of 10. Just a damn good book when it comes to for Catwoman. Yep. Effectively for this new trade series overall, because I've reviewed Volume 5. I have roughly 3 books left to go, and then we're pretty much done with Catwoman Volume 3. Yep. So yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this particular review. Stay tuned for our next review, which could be another Comic Corner. Yep. And this was discussing a DC trade and a Valiant trade. Yep. Next video. Bye.